Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I got my favorite studs for week 9 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. And yeah, I know it's pretty easy to pick these guys and say they're good plays. They're expensive for a reason, but we still have to pick our favorite ones each and every single week, and that's all I'm doing in this video. Also, if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. Alright, and as always with the quarterback position, the first guy I want to talk about is DeShaun Watson at $7,100. I do not have Russell Wilson listed on here. I think he's a fantastic play. I just like the two guys I'm going to talk about a little bit better from a point per dollar standpoint because they're a little bit cheaper and they get good matchups as well. But DeShaun Watson, he gets a great spot here versus Jacksonville. He played them a few weeks ago. He had around 30 DraftKings points, threw for 360 yards, had 3 touchdowns. Very good game from DeShaun Watson. I would not be surprised if we see some similar numbers here. They are dead last, 32nd DVA versus the pass, and they're allowing the third most DraftKings points per game to the quarterback position. And DeShaun Watson, the past 4 weeks, he has not thrown for less than 300 passing yards. He's averaging about 300 passing yards on the season. And this is a really soft spot versus Jacksonville. This game also posts a 50-point over-under, which is pretty good. And they are 7-point favorites, but they have a team total of nearly 29 this week. Now, I like it when Watson's in games where he's trailing just so he has that garbage time. He tends to play pretty well playing from behind. But they did win that game versus Jacksonville 30-14, so that wasn't much of an issue, and he still had a pretty good game. So DeShaun Watson, I think he's an awesome option here. He's also got some clear stacking options in Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. There's some other secondary guys as well, but those are the two clear guys I want to stack him with for the most part. But $700, I think he's a really good play here and just a really soft spot versus Jacksonville. Alright, the next quarterback I want to talk about is Josh Allen at $7,000. Now, he was on fire to start the season, scoring over 30 DraftKings points in the first few weeks. That has certainly tapered off a little bit, but this is a great spot versus Seattle, and pretty much everyone besides Jimmy Garoppolo has had a good game versus Seattle this season as a quarterback, so I'm still willing to buy in here. And Josh Allen, obviously the guy's plenty of talented. He has some rushing upside as well, and he's got STEFON Diggs to get the ball too, but I like this game a lot for fantasy purposes. We got a 54.5 point over-under, which is the highest on the week right now. They have a 25.75 implied team total, and they're 3-point dogs here, but I'm just mainly interested in the matchup versus Seattle. It's absolutely elite. They're 30th DVA versus the pass, and they're allowing the most points per game to quarterbacks, even with the Jimmy Garoppolo disaster last week. I know Mullins came in and got some points, which helped a little bit, but still allowing nearly 30 DraftKings points per game to the position, and it's still crazy, but they're allowing nearly 370 passing yards per game to quarterbacks, which is absolutely insane. So Josh Allen, I think he should have a really good game here, and I like this game a lot. There's a ton of good fantasy options. We have Josh Allen, we have Russell Wilson, you got Metcalf and Lockett, you got STEFON Diggs here, you got some secondary options on Buffalo like John Brown, Cole Beasley. So definitely a big fan of this game, and I like Josh Allen's chances to have a really nice game, something we saw earlier on this season. So big fan of Josh Allen heading into this week. Now we'll move on to the running back position, and I think it's obvious, but we have to talk about Dalvin Cook at $8,200. In my last video last week for the studs, I had Dalvin Cook in my video. Then later in the week, I just kind of got off of that because I wanted to side with Derrick Henry or Alvin Kamara. That was not the right choice because Dalvin Cook had one of the best fantasy performances we're going to see all season. He had over 50 DraftKings points, 4 touchdowns, and absolutely smashed. And I don't think he's going to do that again. I think he can still have a very, very strong game here versus Detroit. This game has a pretty nice 52.5 point over-under, but the Vikings have a really nice 28.25 implied team total, and they're 4-point favorites, which always sets up well for a running back. But Dalvin Cook, he's super talented. He's going to get plenty of volume. He's actually averaging over 20 rushing attempts per game this season and over 1.5 rushing touchdowns as well, with over 100 rushing yards per game too. This is a great matchup versus Detroit. They're allowing the second most points per game to running backs at 32.6 points per game, and they're 21st DVA versus the pass, allowing over 100 rushing yards and over rushing touchdown per game as well. And they're kind of getting beat up through the air. So Dalvin Cook, I think he's an awesome option here. And if you want to make him the staple of your lineups this week, I have no issues with that at all. I know it feels a little bit of like we're point chasing, but we're really not. If this was just a normal week and Minnesota's playing Detroit, I would like Dalvin Cook versus Detroit quite a bit. But it just helps that he went off last week, so that's going to definitely bump ownership up. But definitely think he's a very, very solid cash option this week because the volume's going to be safe. He's super talented. The matchup's good. Vegas checks out. He's kind of just checking all the boxes besides the massive price tag. And the next running back we have here is James Conner at $6,900. It's quite a drop off from $8,200 from Dalvin Cook. Now we're down to $6,900. But I didn't really like anyone in that 7K range enough to make him on this video. Now I like James Robinson. He was actually very close, but I like just James Conner a little bit cheaper for the point per dollar. And the next player we're going to talk about as well. But James Conner's in an awesome spot here versus Dallas. I mean, that team is just absolutely awful. They don't even know who their starting quarterback's going to be yet. It's either going to be Gilbert or Rush. But either way, I mean, the Steelers should be able to just destroy the Cowboys here. They're 13.5-point favorites. They have a team total of 27.5, and they're also on the road in Dallas. The Steelers, though, they have an amazing defense. Dallas is just, this should be a very easy win for Pittsburgh, and if that's going to be the case, they should be up double digits, and James Conner should be able to just get 20-plus carries here and have a really nice game on the ground, over 100 rushing yards, probably find the end zone, hopefully once or twice. Now, his numbers on the season, I mean, they're okay, but over 15 rushing attempts per game, nearly a rushing touchdown per game, only 70 rushing yards, but it's not that bad. The only problem with James Conner is I feel like anytime I'm interested in him, there's always the chance of him just leaving the game early with an injury. The guy is pretty fragile, but assuming he plays a full healthy game here, I think he's a very good option. Dallas has 29 DVA versus the run, and they're bottom half in the league when it comes to running backs, allowing over 25 DraftKings points per game, and nearly 140 rushing yards per game as well. So James Conner, I think the game script's going to set up very well for him, and I think he's a very, very safe, solid volume option in a good matchup versus Dallas. And then the last running back I want to talk about is Chase Edmonds at $6,800. He is the better running back on this Cardinals team. He's finally going to get his chance to shine. He's looked good in his opportunities so far this season, but Kenyon Drake was still the guy getting most of the work. He's averaging 17 rushing attempts per game and about half a rushing touchdown per game in the season, over 70 rushing yards. Now you can completely take that out now. It's going to be the Chase Edmonds show. We should see around 20 touches, maybe just a little bit more, and this is a good spot versus the Miami Dolphins. They have struggled versus the run this season. They are dead last, 32nd DVA versus the run, and they're allowing 26.3 DraftKings points per game to running backs, which is 24th in the league, over 100 rushing yards per game. And Chase Edmonds, this is a good offense, and teams can't just sell it to stop the run. You have DeAndre Hopkins to worry about. You got Kyler Murray keeping defenses honest as well, so Chase Edmonds, I like him quite a bit, and the thing is, he's been the preferred pass-catching running back as well. His numbers on the season are a 13.5% target share and about 4.5 targets per game. So I like Chase Edmonds quite a bit. Should get 15-plus carries on the ground and probably see 5-plus targets, which at $6,800 and a good matchup versus Miami, I'm definitely a fan of that this week. Then moving on to wide receivers, we have Stefon Diggs at $7,400. Obviously, if you like Josh Allen, you have to like his number one wide receiver. He just so happens to be a very good wide receiver too. Stefon Diggs is having a pretty good season. He's getting plenty of work this season, around double-digit targets per game, about a 30% target share. Overall, some very strong numbers for Stefon Diggs. But this is a dream matchup versus Seattle, just like they are versus quarterbacks, allowing the most points per game. That can be said the same for wide receivers as well, allowing the most points per game, which is insane. 61.5 DraftKings points allowed per game, which is by far the most in the league. Nearly 270 receiving yards per game just to wide receivers, and their 30th DVA versus the pass. So I love this matchup for Stefon Diggs. I think he should have a pretty strong game, assuming Josh Allen's on his game, which I think he's going to have a pretty strong game as well, and that should correlate with Stefon Diggs. And if you're looking at the exact numbers so far this season, just a little bit under 10 targets per game, 29% target share, 69% weighted opportunity share, but overall some very strong numbers from Stefon Diggs, and I think he should have a very good game versus a pretty weak Seattle secondary. And the next wide receiver I want to talk about is Keenan Allen at $7,000. I played him the past 2 weeks, and it has certainly worked out. He was too cheap at $6,200. They raised this price tag up to $7,000, which I think is probably right around where it should be, but I still think he's a fantastic play here. This should be a very strong game for fantasy purposes. We have a 53-point over-under and only a 1-point spread, meaning we should have a pretty back-and-forth game here for the most part. And this is a nice soft matchup versus the Raiders. They actually over on PFF this year, they graded out as the worst pass coverage defense in the league, and Keenan Allen should be able to eat them up. His quarterback has looked fantastic. Rookie Justin Herbert is playing anything unlike a rookie. I mean, the guy's been absolutely phenomenal. And Keenan Allen is obviously the preferred wide receiver one in this offense. He gets double-digit targets pretty much each and every single week, well over 10 targets per game, about a 30% target share, and overall some just very, very strong numbers. Now, if you're looking at the matchup versus the Raiders in terms of fantasy points given up, they actually haven't been absolutely awful, and actually a little bit above average in terms of getting up fantasy points per game to wide receivers at only 36.3, which is 13th fewest in the league. But overall, they are 27th DVA versus the pass. And either way, Keenan Allen is just too talented to really be stopped here in the volume and should be able to outweigh anything here. So Keenan Allen, I think he's in a fantastic spot here. He's got a very nice wide receiver versus cornerback matchup advantage this week per PFF as well. So I think it's all systems go once again for Keenan Allen. And if you want to use Justin Herbert this week to pair him up with him, I have no issue with that at all. There's a couple of run backs that I do like on the Raiders, including Darren Waller, which you just might see in a little bit later on in this video. And the last wide receiver I want to talk about is Tyler Lockett at $6,800. I know he disappointed last week quite a bit, and I was a little bit worried about DK Metcalf being on Verrett. I thought Tyler Lockett would have the better game just because I thought Russell Wilson would go his way a little bit more just to try to avoid Verrett, but DK Metcalf is an absolute monster, and that didn't really matter at all. But I do like the price tag on Lockett here. DK Metcalf is almost $1,000 more expensive, and I'm going to assume they're going to get similar volume here. Now, overall, I think DK Metcalf is the better football player, but They still both have Russell Wilson throwing the football, and they get similar targets per game. It can fluctuate week to week. So since Metcalf had his blow-up game last week, maybe it's Tyler Lockett's turn once again. But either way, I like the spot here versus Buffalo. Like I mentioned earlier with Josh Allen and STEFON Diggs, we got a nice 54.5 point over-under here, and a very high-scoring game it should be. And both these defenses have struggled so far this season. Now, Buffalo has been a little bit stingy versus wide receivers. They're actually allowing the 7th fewest points per game at 32.6 DraftKings points to wide receivers, but they're 22nd DVA versus the pass. And the nice thing is, Tyler Lockett should be able to avoid Tre'Davious White for the most part. I would assume Tre'Davious White's going to be all over DK Metcalf, so Tyler Lockett should have the softer matchup here. And according to PFF this week, in their wide receiver versus cornerback matchup column this week, Tyler Lockett actually has a nice advantage versus the slot corner Johnson over on Buffalo. And DK Metcalf's actually looking at a disadvantage versus Tre'Davious White. Now, I'm not saying DK Metcalf's going to get blanked here and not have a good game. It would not surprise me if he comes out with 100-plus yards and 2 touchdowns, something like that, because the guy's an absolute beast. But I like Lockett's price point. Or actually, I thought DK Metcalf was $7,500. He's $7,800, so he's $1,000 cheaper. So if you're going to give me just point per dollar wise, and they should get similar targets, I'll take Tyler Lockett over DK Metcalf once again. You just got to hope that Tyler Lockett doesn't have another poor game and DK Metcalf goes absolutely off. But overall, in the individual matchup for Lockett is a little bit softer here for DK Metcalf. Then the last position we're going to talk about is tight end. I only have one guy listed here. Now, I was tempted to go with Travis Kelce because Darren Waller at 5,800 is more of a mid-range play. But the way tight ends work, I would say 5,800 is more so expensive. Like, I feel like 5,800 is more like $7,000 at other positions. And I like this spot here for Darren Waller versus the Chargers. And I do like that game for fantasy purposes. I think a Justin Herbert, Hunter Henry, Keenan Allen, Darren Waller stack is definitely a good way to go in tournaments this week because the Chargers have been a little bit weak versus tight ends this season. And it's hard to find a better tight end than Darren Waller outside of like Travis Kelce or George Kittle for the most part. Like, he gets targeted heavily pretty much each and every single week. And the Chargers are giving up 14.8 DraftKings points for the tight ends, which is 23rd in the league, and nearly about 3/4 of a receiving touchdown per game to the position as well. And Waller, like I mentioned, he's going to get plenty of targets each and every single week. On the season, he's got a 27% target share, about 8.5 targets per game, which is actually more than Travis Kelce is getting. So I know it's not 8.5 targets from someone like Patrick Mahomes, but still, I'll take the targets each and every single week, and it's a pretty soft spot here versus the Chargers defense that has struggled with tight ends so far this season. And I like this game a lot for fantasy purposes. It should be pretty back and forth. It's only a 1-point spread, 53-point over-under. So Darren Waller, I think he's going to have a pretty solid game here versus Los Angeles Chargers. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. So I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. I think my next video will be the Showdown video. I'll have that posted either later tonight or tomorrow morning. Probably tomorrow morning, because there's a lot of stuff going on in that game. We actually have to make sure it plays for sure. I mean, it's supposed to, but you never know. There's coronavirus, and on both sides. I know the Packers had it with the running backs, and then Kendrick Bourne just got it today on the 49ers. So hopefully that game ends up playing. It should, but if it does, I will have my video out tomorrow morning more than likely, and then we'll do the mid-range plays, the value plays, and all the rest of the stuff later on in the week. So that being said, I'm going to get out of here, guys. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one.